Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Agents of S.h.i.e.L.D., a great episode. In this episode, I like the fact is that you do see Cassius, like, slowly as the seasons progress and things kind of go less and less in Cassius' way, he kind of loses his mind a little bit. Especially in this episode, after seeing Sonara, because Sonara is the person he's relied on the most. Like, as we know bits and pieces about their past, but it seems like she's the person that's always kind of been there for him. She's always kind of paved the way for him, and now she's gone, and he's up there, like, talking to her dead body. It's at that point, it's like, oh, you're not going to help me the way I want you to? Okay. He ends up shooting that one, Creed in the head, which was pretty brutal because, like, even when you cut away from that scene, you still see his blue blood scattered all over the back of the wall. Because it's like he wanted, because I think I brought that up before. I was like, could that work on a Creed or not? The whole, like, situation of trying to bring someone back from the dead or no, was it that or something else? No, it was an Inhuman. Like, could, like, the Inhuman situation, could you make a Creed an Inhuman or not? I feel like that it doesn't work. I feel like that might have come up before, but that's what I was thinking of last episode. In this episode, Cassius was talking about trying to bring Sonara back, but it's like, no, that can work on someone else, but like, almost like Creed's bodies are too intricate with that whole situation. Like, the way to bring people back has been tailored towards humans and probably life forms kind of in that similar vein, but not Creed. So that kind of sucked. I was like, oh, that would have been interesting if they had brought Sonara back. But was also that, what's that stuff he called it? Odium, that black stuff. The moment once it enters your system, you basically go into rage mode and you basically burn like a raging fire until you just like burn out, because it will eventually kill you because it puts so much strain on your body and your heart. Basically, your heart explodes from it. I wasn't too surprised when Cassius ended up taking it. I thought he would have actually taken it sooner, because I had this whole idea that, like, oh, Cassius is going to ultimately make himself, like, fuse himself with inhuman abilities or something like that. But it's like, no, he kind of raged himself out a little bit, kind of go all out in a way to restore his father's, restore honor. It's kind of interesting, too, because the way he kind of phrased it, I mean, not phrased it, but how he talked about it in this episode, like, oh, yeah, like, still trying to seek his father's approval, help his father, is by making sure that S.h.i.e.L.D. dies now, so they can't go back in time and try to potentially change anything. For him, it's also, like, the fact of the matter is, because I guess by helping his father, he's ultimately helping himself, because, like, in the past, it would be like, well, my father couldn't claim Earth like he wanted to, but now he can, because S.h.i.e.L.D. won't be there to stop us. And that also will bring the Cassius name, because I was kind of getting that, I was like, Cassius was just simply his name. It's like, no, Cassius is the family name. I guess it's kind of like the Japanese situation of, like, well, you know, a surname is just kind of typically how you would associate somebody, but nevertheless, so it would ultimately help him in the end too, because maybe he wouldn't have to be in a situation he's in right now if it wasn't for said, you know. It even makes it seem like his father kind of got kicked out of the whole Kree, like, because his father couldn't take over Earth. It seemed like he kind of got, like, almost a little bit of a banishment of his own, or just kind of like, I don't know, the way he made it seemed like his dad wasn't as top dog as he used to be because of him not being able to take Earth. It kind of brought shame to him amongst the Creed or something like that. So there is a lot that went down in this episode. Big reveal, and I thought was so beautifully done, was a reveal like, oh, who is Cassius' seer? And it's like, lo and behold, it's freaking Yo-Yo, but it's Yo-Yo from this time period. And I was like, how are you still alive? I was like, that doesn't make any sense. I'm like, it's like, that was like 70 some years ago. And I'm like, right. He brought you back from the dead. I was like, oh, I guess once you come back from the dead, you don't age or whatever. And it's like, but Yo-Yo kind of explains, it's like they kill her and bring her back every so often. So that's what her whole situation's about. And it makes sense why she would be a seer, because she's lived everything before, so she knows exactly how everything plays out. But even she tries to explain, like, she tried to give him as little information as possible because she knew how things were going to play out ultimately. So she didn't want to give him too much of an advantage by letting him only know the bare minimalist of things, so that things could play out the way they're supposed to. And I love this because, like, now Yo-Yo's learning about the loop, because they've kind of been out of this whole situation. They don't really know all the whole time loop situation. And even, like, Yo-Yo's like, I want to tell you what to do, but at the same time, it's like, all I can do is sit here, and when I'm talking to you, all I'm thinking about is, like, what the Yo-Yo that I met when I went through this, the Yo-Yo, when I was in your position talking to the Yo-Yo that was sitting here, and, like, I'm thinking about that, and just everything playing out the way they did. We tried to go back and change everything, but it didn't work out, and it's just kind of like, it's That's such a harsh situation, dude, because it legitimately makes you go, we're literally stuck in a loop. Like, I thought we could change everything, even though in the future we still couldn't stop the future from happening. And it's like, that is so depressing, because it's just like we're stuck in this endless loop. And how do we break it? Will you be able to want to break it? Because like I said, everyone's got the idea. Like, we already heard it from Fitz and Simmons. It's like, can the past even be changed? Like, things are set in stone. That things are always going to play out the way that they play out, you know? And so it's so fascinating. And it's like, it's got to be really tough on Yo-Yo, because it's just like, you know, because I think at the same time too, I mean, it's that situation of like, there's just not enough time to tell her everything that's needed. But I think maybe it wasn't really a concern that she brought up, but I'm surprised it wasn't a concern of like, well, what if I tell you too much and it changes time? Well, it's like, well, the point is for things to change, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. But it's like, what if you tell them the wrong thing and things don't, because the future is bad, but I guess it's like in their case, things could be worse. So let's stick to the script. It's like, even when she tries to say like, oh, like there's a point where she stops herself at one point in time, because she's like, right, I'm literally about to say what the other Yo-Yo told me, and I'm trying to tell you something different. But even then, like, those words start flowing from my mouth. So it's like, are those even mine? It's like, no, those are the other Yo-Yo talking. So it's just kind of being lost in your own world. It's because in a weird way, it's like the past, the present, and the future are literally all happening in her mind at the same time. So it's just kind of fascinating. We knew what to do. We knew what was coming, but the more we fought, it just seemed like the sooner it came, you know? And it's just like, that's rough, dude. Especially when it's like, so much happens. It's like Mac dies, which I immediately thought that's what's going to happen with the whole fight with Cassius. I'm like, Mac is by himself. He's got to fight. There's like two other, Creed there, and plus like you got Cassius all hulking out. I'm like, oh no! I was like, don't let this be where Mac dies, especially because Mac's getting a crap beat out. I'm like, because like when Yo-Yo was like, no, she was tearing up and everything before Cassius killed her, which I was like, man, that sucks super hard. But I guess like the reason why she was acting like that was because it's because for her it's like she hasn't seen Mac in a very long time, and it's just seeing him again. Plus it's like, I was thinking like, oh, it's because she knows that he's going to die in his room, but it's like, no, because she knows what the future holds for him. And it's just like, also maybe it's because she didn't want him to see her dying like this, because it might be a situation of like, by seeing Yo-Yo die like that, it sets things to a whole different precedent later on in a timeline. It's because he saw her die like that he tries so hard to protect her later on at some point in time, you know, that maybe that might be what, you know, you don't know how this whole situation can be like, because it's one thing to fear someone die, but to be able to see them like that, to see the woman you love die like that, even though that wasn't necessarily her, that's still something that's probably going to sit with him and haunt him. And like I said, that might play some role of like, oh, something that might have hurt Yo-Yo he might take the blow for her and end up dying because of it. But at least for now, he's alive, which, man, it just, well, like I said, you can't even accept that as a good thing, because there's a part of your brain that goes, but we already know that he does die at some point in time already. Even before this Yo-Yo said anything, was because we saw Yo-Yo's pass a little bit during the Robin episode when, you know, when she was with May. Like I said, they've done such a fantastic job. Like I said, I brought it up before, like the whole time situation gets a little confusing because that's just how time travel is. But it's such a fascinating story that they've set up with this whole situation of time travel, because I do like time traveling as like a form of storytelling, but it's just so interesting when you have to stack timelines of trying to change things. But it's like basically you're seeing basically, like I said, it's all one loop. You know, it's just like, oh, this led to this, led to this, led to this, but it's like all that kind of goes back, you know, like a clock anyway. It always goes back to 12 and so at some point in time, you know. So it's just kind of, I don't know, which is kind of like probably a terrible metaphor in that sense, especially considering the fact that the clock goes to 12 twice. I'm being stupid. I do apologize. I don't know. Like I said, I'm loving what they've done with this season so far in this whole situation. So I am just curious to see how that all plays out, especially now that we know that one of the big catalyst moments in this was Coulson dying, because we see that he ended up dying because basically they ended up fighting that first dude, and I guess like when he cut Coulson, he bled into Coulson, so that illness hit, that stuff that kills you, it's there. I guess because it was a small enough dose that it didn't affect him, or maybe it's a situation of because the blade itself was poisoned or tipped with it. But there's like, you haven't seen Coulson kind of rage out or anything, so either it you know, because with everyone else, maybe it's a situation of you have to, because it's such a minute amount, it's enough to kill him because it seeped into the wound, and because he didn't digest it, maybe that changes, like, you know, how it affects your body. Or like I said, maybe it was just in the weapon itself. Like I said, because at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, does this have to do with his deal with the Ghost Rider? But then it's like, well, maybe this ultimately plays a role in that, because like when Coulson dies and they try to bring him back, because that's what Yo-Yo said was ultimately the thing, is like, when Coulson dies, we have to let him stay dead, because but they couldn't, just because of loyalty, just because of how they care about everything. It's like the previous Yo-Yo knew about that too, but she was like, no, we can't just let Coulson die. And so she tried to save Coulson, which kind of basically played a catalyst and let everything kind of turn out the way it did anyway. Coulson knows he's dying, but he's not letting anyone know. So the only other person is Yo-Yo, and I'm curious to see what Yo-Yo does. I think she might tell Coulson if she gets the chance. Like, I know what's going to happen, and then it's like, tell him what future Yo-Yo told him, and he's like, okay. So it's probably cemented already in his mind, because, like, you know, Coulson probably had no intention of telling anyone. Because I was wondering, because it's like, you see him try and fight so hard because Daisy's like, I'm going to stay here. And he's like, no, you're not. She's like, well, yeah, I am. Because even there's just a small chance I'm the reason this happens. And he ices her just because he's like, yeah, I'm sorry that you feel that way. But the fact of the matter is, we need you back here to lead. And it's like, now you look back at that statement, like, because Coulson's always looked at Daisy as a leader. Like, if anyone was going to take over his position, it's always been Daisy. Because even back with this whole, like, you know, the whole situation was last season, he wanted her to take over S.h.i.e.L.D. It was always his idea for her to, you know, for it to be an Inhuman to take over, and he wanted it to be Daisy just because that's kind of what she's being trained up for. And he knows, like, oh, I'm dying. It's like, well, that means that they're going to need a leader, and it's like, who's better to lead than you? You have the strength. You're ready for this. You'll be the one to kind of lead, be able to take charge of the situation. And so it's like, what are they going to do then? Like, the team is going to want to save Coulson, but then it's like, Yo-Yo knows that they shouldn't do that they tried to, you know, not listen to that, and it still plays into the loop. I mean, it's like, how do you break a loop like this? Like I said, because everything's set up to make it be like, can you even change the future? Is everything set in stone that no matter what you do, things will always play out the way that they're meant to? Is this destiny? Is this providence? Is this always meant to be, you know? The other thing I liked in this episode too is Deacon. I loved it. Like him making that comment like, oh my god, these guns, they're so good. This is like super unfair. You need to be careful, like in case like the wrong person get this in their hands. And even like May kind of makes a joke of like, oh yeah, it's almost like you need some kind of system in place to make sure just not anybody gets those guns. But also Deacon's like, oh great. Okay, Enoch needs help protecting, getting the machine ready and everything. Okay, I'll go. And they're like, Daisy's like, I'll go with you. He's like, no, because you're part of this whole time travel situation. You have to be here because, you know, y'all have to take any chances you can to make sure that the future is saved. And then you have Coulson be like, come on, Deke. The fact of the matter is, you don't know, you'll be outgunned. There's so many of them. You have Deacon be like, dude, I'm literally having a hero moment here, and you're literally kind of shitting on it. It's like, come on, is this supposed to be a pep talk or what? And then you have Daisy be like, no, I'm gonna go with you. And he's like, stop being so stubborn. I do appreciate this side of you, this good side of you, that the fact of the matter is you care about people and you want to protect them. That side of you, never lose it, because the fact of the matter is, Earth in the past is going to need that. So it's like, yo, so basically don't try and destroy the world. And even Daisy kind of like, okay, you almost had it. It was almost a good moment there. And she's kind of calling him a jerk. And he's like, yeah, well, you're still a pain in the ass. So it's like, oh, Deke, even in the end, you know. It's crazy because it's like, yeah, Deacon started off kind of a douchebag, but ultimately he ends up sacrificing himself. Not just him, too, Enoch. Enoch's like, I'm so damaged, and it's like, my battery can be used to save, like, charge this whole situation, but I'd basically explode and level a lot of the lighthouse, and along with that, the person next to me would die, too, so even Deacon dies. Quote-unquote dies. I don't know. That whole explosion thing could have done, I mean, it's like, oh, it atomizes, Deacon. It's like, maybe that could be a situation of like, well, it gave him powers or something. I don't know. The way they're setting it up, it makes it seem like, nah, Deacon's dead, which is kind of sad because it's like, just the way everything's kind of set up in that situation, you just, I mean, because it's like, oh, Tess was dead, but she came back. Which really quickly about that, it wasn't until Coulson had that conversation with her, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I know what you're going through, and I was like, right, you know all about the being dead and coming back thing, because it's like I referenced that quite a bit in just different points in times in videos and recordings, but for whatever, it still didn't sink in my head until I saw them on screen together. It's like, right, Coulson knows exactly what you're going through, the whole like being dead thing, but it's like, hey, it's a little weird and awkward, but the fact of the matter is, this is what's important. The fact is, all these people you're going to be helping save, like, you know, take this opportunity that's given to you and make good with it, essentially. So, and then, you know, Tess, you know, initially at the beginning was kind of like not all about fighting back, but now she's like, you were right, we can fight back. So basically, the rest of humanity that's escaping the lighthouse is up to Tess to protect, along with Flint, because he leaves with them later on, because it's like, well, he still has a job to do. And it's kind of interesting because Tess sets it up to be like, okay, here's your blueprint for the Earth with what he did with the monolith. It's like, you know, because there was that girl that Simmons had helped understand her powers, how to control them. She kind of did the same thing for Flint to let him learn how to make the monolith. I also thought it was kind of interesting. It's like, oh yeah, sending those Creed out the airway like that. Yeah, it's like, I mean, well, no, that wasn't my idea. That was the fiance's. And you have Matt being like, oh, okay. And then he pauses and he goes, wait, what? And just, I was like, oh, because even Fitz had to stop himself, like, oh, right. I guess they were waiting for the right moment to tell everyone together, but it's like, no, Fitz kind of ruined it. It's like, oh yeah, because they have kept that, like, top secret because no one else knows about that. So, like I said, because that whole situation is actually super sad, because it's like, there's a lot of stuff in this future, like a lot of the Inhumans that were sold off and everything. Like, we will never really know much about that beyond this. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's like, we do know that those Inhumans will at least exist at some point later on in the timeline if Earth is saved. But then again, it's that situation of, well, if history changes, who's to say that those kids won't eventually be born? Who's to say things won't play out so that some of those later on, those people who died, or some of the people who were born under those circumstances, like, what if someone like Tess and Flint and Deacon were never born? You know, it's stuff like that you got to think about. Because I was thinking like, oh, well, there's at least, because that's a world that we're getting dived into, this whole world, but we'll never like know like beyond what the scope of this series, because there's so much more story even outside of what we're getting right now. Like I said, with all the Inhumans being sold off to all those people around the galaxy, but it's like, that's a story we'll never get to know, especially if they do what they need to and make it so that none of this happens. But question is, can they? And that also took me by surprise too. Like I said, all my thoughts were kind of like, oh, it's Flint. Flint goes back with them and everything. I started thinking, oh, maybe someone else goes with him, maybe Deacon, maybe Tess. But it's like, no, they're needed here in the future. Because the fact of the matter is, I guess, because that's a question too, is when it's all said and done, if the timeline is broken. Because certain things kind of make it seem like, because, I guess it depends on where you pull your time travel knowledge from. Because certain aspects of my mind is like, once time has been changed, that original timeline disappears. Like, I won't use any specific examples because I would have referenced The Flash and that would have been going DC. But nevertheless, the whole point is like, well, the original timeline is where this is going down, right? Well, once timeline B is created, most situations it's like, well, timeline A will fade from existence. But in other cases, it's like, no, timeline A still exists and it will just go down its own path. We'll just have these two separate points in time, just because like time diverges in like multiple different directions of like how things could have gone and how things. I mean, because really in time, when it comes to time, everything's relative, because it's like, oh, how things could have gone and how they did go. It's like, well, in timeline A, things did and are going this way, and if they do save the world, it's like in timeline B, this is the way they are, and like what is and what could be is all relative to the respective timeline that you're following. So it's I feel like I'm super overcomplicating it because that's how I do, but it's just, I don't know, something interesting to think about. It's going to be interesting too because when they go back in time, they're also going to be meeting Enoch, which is kind of weird to think about. I mean, he is their friend and everything, because it's like, well, we know you a little bit better than you know us, because like we spent time with you and got to know you, and now it's like, oh, well, here we are kind of getting to know you, and now you're alive and everything. So that's definitely going to be interesting. I am curious to see when exactly time is picking up for them. I'm assuming it's going to be around the time Fitz left. So that means like after like that 6-month time skip, because I guess in the grand scheme of things, they can't go back to the moment they left, because that would lead to a paradox, because Fitz wasn't with them, and then they go back to that moment. Well, Fitz would run into Fitz. Not unless it's a situation of they do go back to that moment, but they go back to that moment after Fitz has been taken, and they just kind of reassume everything. you know, maybe it's a situation of while Fitz is kind of locked away in that 6 months and everything, we see what the rest of the team was kind of doing in that 6 months of trying to save the world and everything. Because it, like I said, because I'm curious to see like I said, where the whole timeline kind of picks up when they do get back, you know? Like I said, in the grand scheme of things, this whole future arc situation ended slightly better than I thought it would. I guess we're transitioning over into potentially the second half of the season going forward. I guess like this whole future arc is done. I mean, it's really kind of hard to say because it seems like, I mean, like a lot of storylines are still relatively connected, you know? So I don't know whether this situation still counts as kind of like part of the first half of the season, or does it, you know, like I said, is it still being continued? You know, I guess because of the whole aspect of the time travel thing, it's like, well, the future aspect is all of the first half, and the second half is about trying to prevent the future aspect, you know? So I don't know. We'll ultimately see, like, especially where this all takes us, especially when it comes to Coulson and everything, what the future has for him and the team. And it's like, the question is like, is it, what caused Daisy to do it then? You know, because it's like the team, like, you know, Coulson still wants to believe it wasn't Daisy that caused this. The team's like, even if it did, we can still find a way around it. But it's like, if it's not Daisy, then what set this off? Could it be Coulson's death? Like I said, there's also the aspect of like the Ghost Rider thing. Like, what happens to Coulson when he dies because of his Ghost Rider? We still don't know what price he has to pay. And it's like, does that price end up coming up when they try to revive him and it calls something cataclysmic? We don't know. Because in the grand scheme of things, that's another thing we don't know. Like, what happened to Daisy when it was all said and done? Like, because in that time we saw with Robin, it's like, we never actually saw whatever happened to Daisy. It's just like, oh, Daisy split the earth, but that was about it. We never found out beyond that. And then it also begs the question, too, what is that whole S.h.i.e.L.D. situation that Yo-Yo was warning about? Like, she was trying to fight back against something that's coming. It's like, oh, we knew it was coming. I assumed it was the Creed and everything, which it seems like that is very likely, but it's like, once again, that situation of like, well, why would May agree to do that? I guess because she, you know, obviously because they traveled back in time and knew that this was the last hope for humanity. It was the only way to make sure that humanity stayed alive. Yes, it would suck any being enslaved, but at the very least, the rest of humanity would be alive. It's like, this is the way things played out. So until like things can potentially change, we have to let them play out this way to this extent, you know? Which then begs the question of what did happen to everyone else. Whatever happened to the Fitz and Simmons of that time. We know what happened. We see where Yo-Yo ended up. She ended up dying and then constantly being resurrected and killed again. But like, what happened to, like, because Robin never actually said exactly what happened to May. Well, because she did see May's death, but, you know, we never got any details on that, so I would assume it was after this whole lighthouse situation, probably around the time Yo-Yo died, because of the whole prophecy situation. It's like, oh, we have to kill you off too. I mean, Robin was probably killed off around the same time. I mean, May might have been killed off around the same time, like, Robin was sent to the surface, because it was like, you know, especially because he wanted to get rid of anything that could potentially make the prophecy come true. And he's like, oh, here's some S.h.i.e.L.D. agents in front of me. Gotta wipe them out. So, like I said, overall, a great episode. I'm super excited to see where the show takes us in the next episode. Sadly, we will be waiting a while because the show is going on exactly a month break, essentially, and will not be returning until March 2nd. So we will just have to wait quite a while until we kind of see where everything picks up. I'm very interested because even Coulson kind of brought it up. Well, May in particular, she's like, you know, Daisy will never forgive you. And he's like, well, all I can do is hope that she does. The fact is he's running out of time, but he's, once again, being who Coulson is, there's no way he's going to tell the team that he has limited time, you know, so we will just have to see. Enjoy it. Good day and good